Today we visited Delphi, and it was an amazing place to go. Maria gave a lovely presentation on the Greek gods. And it was interesting and valuable in itself. I found it very helpful. But the knowledge of these Greek gods also helps us to understand the New Testament. Which book? If you had to pick one book in the New Testament that mentions Greek gods, what would it be? Acts. It is Acts. Listen out for this, as I'm going to read 5 verses from Acts 14, verses 11 through 15. The Apostle Paul, by the power of God, has just healed the man who was born without any power in his feet. He never walked. When the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in the speech of Laconia, "The gods are come down to us in the likeness of men." And they called Barnabas Jupiter, Zeus in the Greek, and Paul Mercurius, Hermes in the Greek, because he was the chief speaker. Then the priest of Jupiter Zeus, which was before their city, brought oxen and garlands unto the gates, and would have done sacrifice with the people, which, when the apostles, because they were sent by the church at Antioch, Barnabas and Paul heard of, they rent their clothes and ran in among the people, crying out and saying, "Sirs, why do ye do these things? We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living God, which made heaven and earth and the sea and all things that are therein." So when Paul works a miracle by God's might in Lystra, the pagan people conclude, they're fitting it into their religion and worldview, that these two men must be Olympian gods, Zeus and Hermes, because this is the sort of thing that the Olympian gods did. They would come down to earth and do wonderful, or sometimes not so wonderful things like rape women. They thought that Paul was Hermes, and they thought that Barnabas was Zeus. Now, we would have reckoned that Paul would have been the top of the gods. But the idea is that Hermes is the messenger god, so Hermes is the one who does most of the speaking. That must be Paul. But the real power is the one who sits there and doesn't say so much and has his messenger speaking. So Barnabas is Zeus, Paul is Hermes. Now, what do you do in the Greek worldview if you think that Zeus and Hermes have turned up and performed a miracle? You put a garland over them. When I read this, I often think of the traditions in Hawaii or India. I don't know how similar they are. And you offer sacrifice. The man to offer sacrifice is on the spot because there was a temple of Zeus just nearby outside the city. And so that's probably why Zeus himself has come. He's been honored by our sacrifices over the years. And the issue, one could say, at Lystra that day was category. What category are Paul and Barnabas? Once they do a miracle, the pagans of Lystra think gods. They're really gods, this pair, that have taken on a temporary appearance as human beings. And Paul responds by saying, in effect, we are of the purely human category. That's what he meant when he said, we are men of like passions with you. We get tired. we get hungry. We're tempted to become angry. Although the gods actually were tempted to get angry too, so that one doesn't help. And the gods did very human things. But we are totally human. And he scarcely managed to stop the people from offering sacrifices. So convinced were they that Zeus and Hermes had appeared. And you know what happens in the days thereafter. Angry Jews from Antioch in Pisidia and Iconium come. They convince the people that Paul and Barnabas are troublemakers, and then Paul is stoned, dragged out dead outside the city, and God miraculously raises him up to life again. And this is a great example of the fickleness of the crowd, because one day it's Barnabas and Zeus. The deities have arrived and come to town. And the next day they were criminal scumbags who ought to be stoned to death rather than be the recipients of sacrifice. Moving ahead in the book of Acts, you will recall, we spoke of this too in Philippi, of the demon-possessed girl. That demon-possessed girl, some reckon she was a Pythia of Delphi. Anyone here recently been in Delphi? Brian says he's been there. Good. A Pythia of Delphi. This is the view, for instance, of John Pollock. Mike Veldhuis read John Pollock recently, and it's a possibility that this was a lady who had been used as a priestess to bring a sort of revelation, an oracle, and that she had been purchased as a slave and was still in the business of prognosticating. I mean, it would fit. Then we come to Athens, and we have three names of Greek gods. Can anyone think of a Greek god in connection with Athens? Athene. It's in the name of the very city. She was the god of military strategy and wisdom. Within the city, can anyone think of a name of a Greek god anywhere in the city? Mars Hill. And the Greek for Mars, the equivalent was Ares. So it was the Areopagus, the hill of Ares. And he was the god of war. And if you have the goddess of military strategy and the god of war on your side, I mean, you're really going to go places. And again, Paul's speech, Lord willing, we'll say more about that when we get to Athens at some point. Again, the key issue is category. Because Paul says, now hold on, I've seen you're very religious and all the statues and all the gods that you honor, but getting a little bit nearer the truth, one of your own poets said that we are the offspring of the gods. So if we're the offspring of the gods, how can God be represented by wood and stone and gold and silver? Because we're actually better than that. That doesn't fit. There's an inbuilt problem within your theological system. So three names. The name of the city, the name of the place within the city. We've got Athene, we've got Ares, and then one of the converts. The name of one of the two converts mentioned at the very end of Acts 17. They both begin with D. Easy to remember. DD, Doctor of Divinity. Damaris was the woman, and the man was Dionysius the Areopagite. And Maria has mentioned that Dionysius was the god of wine and sensual physical pleasure. So we have Athene, Ares, and Dionysius. Not that any of them appeared there like Lystra, but the names of these gods were mentioned in connection with the city and the place and a convert. Then we move to another person's name. He was a Jew, originally from Alexandria. He pops up in the Bible, first of all, in Ephesus. Later we see him in connection with Corinth. His name was Apollo. Anyone know one of the famous shrines or temples to Apollo? Anybody? Any ideas? Famous shrine, temple to Apollo? Delphi. So Apollo. We've got to pause. This actually works well.
Oh, it looks like our coach driver is going to pull in here to a rest area. So we'll end this presentation on the Greek god in Acts, and we'll resume with part 2, Lord willing, next time.